welcome everybody to the last session of the day. I hope you're well fortified with cake and beverages and ready to go. We've got 3 presentations left today. I'm Kate Robinson. I'm the University Librarian at the University of Bath, and I'm really pleased to open this session where we're going to be looking at workplace and organisational culture. So again, we appreciate your patience and understanding as we're bringing this conference to both in-person and virtual attendees, but I'm very pleased that all our speakers are here in person this afternoon. The speakers are going to have their turn presenting, and at the end of the presentations, we'll begin the Q&A, but we're going to make one slight change for these particular 3 sessions because one of our presenters has got a plane to catch. So after the first presentation, we'll just take a few questions at that point if there are any. So for those of you online, start thinking now, pop them into the chat, and please feel free to use the Q&A function, and our in-person feed loop moderator will ask your question on their behalf. So that's just for the first, and then for the next 2 speakers, we'll take questions together at the end, as we have been doing throughout the conference. So our first presenter is Vivian Lewis from McMaster University in Canada, and her work is titled Supporting the Academic Library Workforce, Updates from the Canadian Association of Research Libraries. Vivian has held the position of University Librarian at McMaster University since August 2013. She currently serves as President of the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, and she's a former member of the Board of Directors of both the Association of Research Libraries and the Canadian Federation of Library Associations. So please help me welcome to the stage Vivian Lewis.
So good afternoon, everyone. I am very honored to be given some time on this program to focus attention on the library workforce with a particular lens on the work happening in Canada. I'm the University Librarian at McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada, but I speak to you today as the President of CARL, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, the voice of the country's 29 largest research libraries and 2 federal institutions. So I'll provide some historical background on CARL's approach to workforce development, and then I'm going to jump into 4 areas of recent activity: competencies, EDI, professional learning, and logic model. You can consider it a little bit of a Canadian potpourri. So of course, library work has changed dramatically from these early photographs taken from Canadian archives, when our focus was primarily on book-like material, and when the hottest thing going at the University of Manitoba was a new automated computer-based circulation control apparatus. I was very curious about that great big computer. And of course, today's university library workforce in Canada and around the world is involved in a wide spectrum of roles. And some of them are pushing the boundaries of what we traditionally think of as library work: virtual and augmented reality, data visualization, digital media, makerspace. And if I look at CARL's workforce work from 20,000 feet, I see 4 key themes. We supplement the work happening locally and focus our attention on workforce projects where a national approach simply makes sense. We have a very strong focus on identifying and building a skills-based training at the level of competencies, again, assuming that much of the skills-based work is best delivered at the local level. And we endorse the IFLA approach to professional development that sees the responsibility for PD being shared by the employee, the employer, the professional associations, and the library schools. And we avoid duplicating the work of others at all costs. And I would argue that much of CARL's current workforce activity is founded on a landmark study released in 2005 called The Future of Human Resources in Canadian Libraries. And the study revealed many areas of concern: the rapidly aging of the workforce. We learned that we were aging faster than the rest of the population, which has always intrigued me. The lack of diversity in our ranks, but perhaps most noteworthy was the revelation, which seemed shocking at the time, that large number of librarians felt poorly trained for the leadership and IT roles being required of them. So we embarked shortly afterwards on a major effort to identify what we described at the time as the core competencies required of all librarians, regardless of their role in 21st century Carl libraries. And we landed on 7 competencies at the time. And I remember that 2 of those competencies got the most attention. The slightly radical notions, which of course do not seem radical now, that all librarians, regardless of their positions, should exhibit clear leadership skills and deep technology competencies. The ADAR's Redux survey that was produced in 2013-14 told us that we still had a long way to go. We had not made significant progress in broadening the diversity of our workforce. And second, although university librarians like myself thought we had made such great strides, rank and file librarians continue to express concern with the amount and quality of training being provided. So in response, Carl hunkered down to deliver more and better learning and development opportunities for the workforce. And we established the Librarians Research Institute as an annual week-long experience focused on research methods and approaches. And we launched the Canadian Library Assessment Workshop, the CLAW, a biennial statistics and assessment event. And we started offering a host of other very specific learning opportunities in specific areas like OER and RDM. And we began planning for a major undertaking, a 1-week leadership institute directly geared to associate university librarians and directors. But we all know what happened then. COVID hit, and life as we knew it changed overnight. And we sent our workforces home in March 2020 and transitioned most of our key services to online delivery. For many Canadian research libraries, my own included, a large proportion of employees didn't start coming back in large numbers until January, February 2022. And even then, only a few days a week. We now find ourselves facing what has been described as the Great Resignation, the Great Retirement, the Great Reorganization, and the talent crunch. And many of us are facing difficulties filling vacancies, especially for technical specialists. The need for help analyzing and supporting the Canadian library workforce has never been greater. So in September 2020, about 6 months into the pandemic, Carl released a much anticipated reimagining of the competencies. And this time we walked away from the notion of a set of core competencies. Do you remember the first ones were framed as core competencies? We decided that the pace of change in our roles was simply too great. And the level of expertise required for many of our new roles made the notion of core competencies less realistic. And I should note that much of the work on this document was completed at home via Zoom with a feeling of intense urgency. The workforce had changed so dramatically, and we needed the competencies to catch up. And when we look at the 2010 competencies up against the 2020 competencies, we see some interesting patterns. So the concept of interpersonal skills is still there, but this time it's reflected in 3 more nuanced competencies: collaboration, consultation, and partnerships. The concept of leadership is still porting over, but without that mundane moniker of management. But this time it's enhanced with a focus on vision and innovation, terms which didn't have any play at all in 2010. And we determined that everything we do is IT infused. So having one discrete competency based on IT felt wrong-headed in 2022. IT facets appear throughout all of the competencies now. But perhaps most interesting, I think, we dropped collection development and information literacy as separate competencies, seeing them now as two of many departments in our modern organization. We picked up new competencies this time out that never surfaced 10 years ago, EDI being the most noteworthy. And as we begin aggressively trying to fill all these vacancies, and as our librarians head out searching for new roles, the competency statement has become more and more important. We're working on a series of videos right now to promote the competencies. I hope that you will find this work useful. All of the documents I'm describing are on our website. Over the last few years, we've accelerated our work in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I will say this work seemed all the more critical following the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, and following the discovery of unmarked graves on the property of former Indigenous residential schools in Kamloops, British Columbia in May 21. We had already struck a large EDI working group to help move collective action around recruitment, retention, staff learning, services, and spaces, and had appointed our first visiting program officers for EDI to support this complex work. In December 2020, the group released an excellent document titled Strategies and Practices for Hiring and Retaining a Diverse Workforce. The brief document, available again from the CARL website, presents clear recommendations for attracting more diverse pools, for advertising and ultimately hiring more employees from equity-deserving groups. And last fall, we embarked on another national data collection, one described as both a diversity census of our workforce and a more qualitative analysis of the lived experience working inside our organizations. We contracted with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion to conduct the survey. 21 out of 31 CARL member libraries participated in this pilot run. The response rate in the middle of the pandemic was not stellar, about 34% across the country. So we do need to be careful how we use the results. When compared with the Canadian labor force as a whole, we don't appear to be doing too bad. We are slightly below the labor force in terms of racialized persons, but above that bar with respect to other equity-deserving groups. I should note that no attempt was made as part of this national study to measure the composition against the diversity of the home institution student population or against the available workers in the local workforce. But the study showed a significant lack of gender diversity in our functional specialist roles and significant concerns with the lack of diversity in our senior leadership teams. And the lived experience is not a rosy picture. The CCDI poses 13 statements and asks respondents to indicate if they agree, are neutral, or disagree. Analyzed nationally, we scored low on 6 out of the 13 indicators. For example, only 54% of our staff agree that we support them in their overall physical and mental well-being. 30% are neutral and 12% disagree. We acknowledge that the results were undoubtedly influenced by the general unease associated with the pandemic. but knowing how we fared, how our staff perceive our actions during this time of crisis is important. We'll use this data as a benchmark and see how results change in future iterations. I should also note that local variations were significant, and each Carle library has received its own set of data. But variations aside, some of the recommendations coming from the CCDI are quite telling and potentially have universal application. We have a lot of work to do on accommodation, flexibility, and leave policies. The literature suggests that this is a critical area for attracting candidates. We need to rebuild confidence in our conflict management systems. Our staff are simply not convinced that we are acting aggressively enough when problems happen. We need to reduce what is viewed as systemic barriers to advancement. This next one is quite troubling. We need to improve the perceptions of leaders' commitment to respectful and inclusive workplace. I can tell you our leaders are committed, but it doesn't matter if the staff don't see it that way. And finally, more EDI training is required. Carle has accelerated its efforts to support workforce development since the pandemic began. And prior to March 2020, we did most things face-to-face. And once everything closed, the thirst for online learning opportunities became almost insatiable. In 2019, we hosted 4 public webinars. By 2020, the number had climbed to 24. And they run the full gamut: OER, research data, user experience, repository workflows. The community calls organized have been especially valuable. They're loosely themed around a cluster of work and open to everyone, including you, and have been particularly popular. We identify an individual with expertise in the area who is willing to coordinate the meeting. They structure and facilitate the conversation. We focus much attention on building community, and we've offered informal directors meetings every second week for over 2 years as a safe place for directors to secure advice and immediate answers to the question of the day. And we also did a very successful series of Directors +2 calls on specific areas of concern. And just last week, we were finally able to host the first Academic Librarians Leadership Institute in glorious St. John's, Newfoundland. I thought I would close with a wicked problem. How do we convey the value of workforce programs and, frankly, any library program or service? So Carle's assessment committee has been exploring the use of logic models. And so I thought, if you guys are game, I would demonstrate with a workforce issue. Logic models are planning tools used to help create clear pathways to impact. They typically involve a series of group conversations to create buy-in, to help gather data, and to identify potential roadblocks. And the final results, the part I really love the most as a director, the logic model itself typically fits on a single piece of paper. That's good. The logic model forces you to define all of the key resources that you put into a program. These are the inputs, the pink box. Then you identify all the key outcomes, the things you aspire to. The programs are in the blue box. Those are the outputs, the activities, and then finally the outcomes, I should say. And the outcomes are divided into short, medium, and long-term. And the long-term impacts are the critical ones for this conversation. At the bottom of the page, you would see the metrics that you would be using to gather the data and the analysis, the more qualitative information. So we applied the logic model to staff learning at my home institution, and this is what we arrived at. The items in red are things that don't exist yet, but were identified as possibilities through the process. We identified lots of inputs. For example, the HR manager's salary, the money set aside for staff learning. But we also identified many outputs, those activities, the workshops, the staff retreats, and so on. And at the bottom, we listed all of the metrics associated with these various inputs and outputs, most of which are not currently collected. So that's data that needs to be accumulated, and that's why it's in red. And so then we identify all of the outcomes. And so over the short term, we would identify outcomes like staff becoming more aware of the opportunities that were available to them for learning on campus. The midterm impacts could include things like a new mentorship program. And finally, the long-term impacts could involve something like enhanced confidence, higher retention rates. And you look across the bottom, you would see the different kinds of analyses that we would do to determine whether we were on the road to success. Carl has posted several logic models, exemplars on our public website in the hopes that others will explore, create, and deposit their own. So I'm coming to the end of my time, and in summary, I hope that I have conveyed that Carl has been active for many years in the area of strategic workforce development. And we've traditionally modeled a collaborative approach that focuses our attention on areas where national action makes sense. The pandemic has disrupted our organizations and made the need to understand and analyze and support our workforce even more important. I hope that you found this information useful in your own practice, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Our second presentation, we have Valerie and Laura, and just yourself today? Just Valerie, okay. So Valerie's going to talk to us. She's from the University of Florida, and her work is titled Developing an Assessment Program from 0 to 60. She serves as the Assistant Dean of Assessment and Student Engagement and Chair of the Masters in Science Library at the George A. Smathers Libraries at the University of Florida. She provides leadership for the only non-medical science library on campus, with 1.4 million visitors per year, supporting 42 departments across 3 colleges. Her scholarly work has substantially contributed to the literature, and in particular the agricultural sciences, and she's presented both nationally and internationally. She's a 2018-19 Fellow for the Association of Research Libraries Leadership Fellows Programme and served as National Implementation Lead on the 12 million NIH grant-funded VIVO National Networking of Scientists. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So today I'm here to share with you a couple of things. So I want to talk to you about the University of Florida George A. Smathers Libraries Assessment Program and its development over a 5-year period. But before I get started, I want to thank Laura Spears, who is my Director of Assessment, and it's really her vision. And she wasn't able to be here today, but I know she's probably online listening right now and ready to answer questions. So starting my talk today, I'm going to start with an overview of the Smathers Libraries and its assessment program starting in 2017. And I'm going to talk about our reasons and hopes for developing that program. And then I'll share our steps, our missteps, really high level, and the current program strengths and weaknesses. And then I'll wrap up with a quick vision for what our hopes are for the next, for the horizon. So the University of Florida is a comprehensive public land-grant institution with more than 54,000 students. And the Smathers Libraries themselves have 6 libraries located on the UF campus and are an organization of around 250 people with more than 75 serving in faculty lines. So this slide here, this is one way to view the UF libraries, very data centered. For our size and peer group, we have less expenditures per full-time student than our peers. And this relates to salaries, to collections, to total expenditures. And it means for us, in the context of this conversation, that it is important for our organization to make data-informed decisions. I mentioned on the previous slide that we have around 75 tenure track librarians. That means we are a research-heavy environment. All of our librarians have about 10% research assignment or more if they've asked for that. And to support that research, the libraries started a grants program around 2010, and that has increased the number of grants and the number of people serving on grants. And now that's a totally different presentation. We could talk about the grants program. But what we're finding is that in order for us to be competitive with our grants, it's critical that our grant proposals include a strong assessment component. We have invested a lot of time and a lot of money with great success into that program. And we realized that building an assessment program would dovetail and strengthen our grant opportunities and the research coming out of the University of Florida Libraries. So let's go back to 2016 and talk about what assessment looked like in the Smathers Libraries at that time. We lacked a holistic approach. We had some expertise, but it was very siloed, self-initiated. We had people with in vivo experience. We had people with Tableau experience, maybe some IRB experience, maybe somebody else with some study design experience. But those skills were only used for personal research, or in some occasions, they'd be tapped within a committee that they served on. Employees were increasingly being asked to do assessment or research studies, such as the Ithaca S+R surveys, or do focus group testing, but without really understanding how to do that successfully. So they lacked the study design skills. They also lacked the tools. A lot of those tools are subscription-based. They didn't know what the suite of tools were that were out there and offered to them. Or they lacked the experience with unique IRB processes, which I've already mentioned. So there were a lot of frustrations with the type of assessment in order for us to be more data informed. I mentioned we have a strong grant culture. The assessment component on grants was very weak, not very weak, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. My grants manager would not like me to use very weak. We needed for our assessment component of our grants to be strong, and they were strong, but not necessarily strong enough to make our grant success as high as we wanted it to be. In a national environment where that assessment piece is really important to the grant review process. I've already mentioned we had minimal data supported decision making. We had reported to ARL, our statistics to ARL, or Association of Research Libraries, ACRL. We have a local IPEDS reporting that we do for the university. And that was managed by a team of folks, but the frustration level and the time-consuming nature of that reporting meant that they never wanted to look at those stats again. There was no data informed. It was just, oh my God, get this away from me. And then finally, we realized user studies were critical to decision-making, which also meant we needed to offer incentives. That process was incentives for students. So in order for a student to participate in a focus group or an intercept study, we needed to make it that time worthwhile with gift cards and things like that. And so, but navigating that meant we also had to go through IRB in some instances. It's just a pain and a very difficult process for folks to navigate. So this just gets to the fact that we didn't have the infrastructure to successfully incorporate assessment into our environment. And our library needed to gain an understanding of our students in order to design our spaces and in order to create services that the students really utilized. We needed to understand how they use our spaces, how they approach our collections, what their user behaviors are. And we needed to be more open-ended in our approach to students, and that meant more qualitative methods. But as we know, qualitative methods take a lot of time and a lot of expertise, and we did not have that. So in 2016, we hired our first assessment librarian, Laura Spears, and we had a statistics committee, and so she took over the management of that statistics committee. And after a year or two, she realized that maybe it was a better idea if we had an assessment committee. So she realigned the statistics committee and made that the statistics reporting more of a side project, and it became an assessment committee in order to have conversations about assessment projects. And so we saw a stage 1 type of progress where we were beginning to have some improvements in assessment within our libraries. That first step, we improved the research being undertaken by our employees. So Laura joined teams such as one for the Ithaca S+R survey, or Ithaca S+R study. And in her role as assessment librarian, she served as a consultant to any library employee looking to apply for grants and strengthen their internal research products. Next, she worked with the assessment committee to fine-tune the data that was being collected, but it was a subset of that committee and not the whole committee, so that it was a little less onerous. And this would help, it made the data more available and more accessible for data-informed decision-making. She then led library-wide projects that included space use studies and assessments of library-wide events. And she initiated library-wide trainings such as the ACRL Roadshow on information literacy standards. So we have a very first beginnings of a community of practice at the University of Florida after these very first baby steps. That community of practice had a number of successes. So this image is just one of many memes that were posted to student social media forums. One of the great University of Florida controversies is which library of our 6 libraries should be 24/7. And Laura implemented not 1, but 2 user studies of our libraries. And it really put that controversy to rest, and Library West is the front runner. So we've had some clear progress within the libraries, and Laura was able to provide all of quite a number of consultations and really to extend her capacity to support the larger library. But this work still just centered around Laura and around this one person, our assessment librarian. And we hadn't yet built capacity for the work to happen across the organization in a more strategic way. And so ultimately, Laura being just one person with a much needed skill set, we needed to figure out how to position her in order to create a more robust culture. So in 2019, we again changed our approach and transformed the assessment committee into an assessment advisory committee. We didn't really change out the composition of the membership because the people on that committee felt very good about their work, but they were given more of an advisory role where they were able to take on a leadership role. The committee is composed of around 8 people from different library units, and they have 4 major responsibilities. They provide in-house consultations to a library employee. So this may be to support a study design. Maybe you want to do a focus group and you've never done a focus group. This group can help you sort of lay out your plan for that. They can help you with a particular tool if they have a skill set, or to support a researcher in an IRB application. They also do a fair amount of project management. So they've created sub-teams within the larger advisory committee. And these might be projects initiated by our dean or by a library employee, but the sub-teams include volunteers from outside of the advisory committee. And so the work doesn't fall solely on these 8 people. And these projects include usability studies, transcript reviews of our Ask a Librarian virtual chat service, or focus groups of our website or other physical spaces. Responsibilities also include being tapped for grants. And so whereas Laura still finds herself on an incredible number of grants as the assessment component, that opportunity is better distributed across the organization. So the next few slides I'll just run through are some examples of work that has been directly or indirectly implemented because of the capacity that we've built with this new advisory committee. So we've developed a new Tableau dashboard to make data points more accessible to our unit level leadership. This here is our Ask a Librarian dashboard showing our busiest hours, days, and months. And this has helped us be more agile with staffing. And I'll say we have the busiest Ask a Librarian desk in the state. So we are second behind the collaborative desk. And so staffing for us is a huge issue when we have to have 3 people deep in a 250 org, and we're doing hours from 8 in the morning until 7 at night. It's getting those hours right is really important. We've developed user studies that have been more responsive to COVID and which result in more targeted and usable data. This is just one example of we had created an intercept survey, but when COVID hit, we had to transition into an online survey, and we had the people to help do that in the moment. And we've also, this is one of the things that has been the most exciting. We've developed partnerships to explore more creative assessment. So by distributing the workload, we've been able to partner with academic units such as our design, construction, and planning or interior design units on campus that help us do more creative research. So this is an Association of Research Library study that delved into student perceptions about library spaces. And on the left, we have the adjectives used by students to describe our current space in the library, a very specific floor in Marston Science Library, and on the right, how they would like to see the space described. And so these types of partnerships really provide us with the opportunity to be user-driven and also to do kind of fun research, right? And to partner with expertise. I mean, the interior design partnership was an incredibly valuable and eye-opening experience for us. We've explored new tools for behavioral mapping, such as the spatial analysis here. And then now we can spend more time taking our research ideas and making them into action that is scalable across the libraries as a way to actualize into evidence-based solutions. So we hope to take some of our projects into to collaborate with other libraries to implement our studies across institutions in order to help validate the studies that we do. And I think that this team is a great way for us to build capacity and make that work, those partnerships scalable. So as I close out, I'll share our next steps. We have 2 major areas that we hope to focus on in the future. First, we want to build our statistical analyses. These can help us extract more information from our studies and to do a better job of communicating trends and patterns. And we still have very few folks who understand statistical analyses, but not nearly enough what we need. And then second, we want to continue to build our skills in qualitative coding. And this means being able to organize our data into types in order to better understand concepts or themes. And then we hope to collaborate more with our domain specialists, such as our data management librarian, informatics, AI librarians, and to partner with maybe our text mining folks. And so really 20 minutes isn't a long time to sort of cover this program that we've developed over a 5-year period. So reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'll take questions at the very end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. That was really, really interesting. Speaking next is Frederick from the Catholic University of Louvain, and his work is titled Out of the Darkness, How Can Librarians' Skills Help Us to Change Our Organisation? Frederick has a PhD in geology and a master's in management. He was project manager in the extractive industry and an EU consultant in matters of good environmental practice. Since 2001, he's managed the Catholic University of Louvain Library of Sciences and Technologies, and since 2004, he's been engaged in cooperation programs for the development of university libraries in emerging countries, including Haiti, Congo, and Peru. In 2014, he was also appointed as a lecturer in library management. Please welcome Frederick.
Out of the darkness. And out of the darkness, My presentation will speak about the problem we have in our for the organization of our libraries in my university and how our librarians help us to solve this problem. Initially, I expected to present a survey on MOOC Lab, interactive survey in real time, but with Zoom it's too complicated, and I expect to discuss with you at the end. And then I manage the Library of Science and Technologies and Learning Center is a Université Catholique de Louvain, in French, in Belgium. Belgium is a very small country in Europe, but we have 6 campuses since 4 years and approximately 33,000 students. It's a very old university. In 2009, there is the Yatul Congress in Louvain, 2009. It's a university dating from the Middle Age and 15th century exactly. And then we have 14 faculties and 21 research institutes. 14 faculties distributed in 3 sectors. Sector with relative autonomy. Autonomy for decision, autonomy for budget, and it's quite complicated like Belgium. Then we have the sector of humanities and social science, with all the faculties you see, law, criminology, theology, a sector of health science at Brussels in another campus, and the sector of science and technology. You can see my library. It's a library for 3 faculties. Joined together is in my library, but you have to know that, for example, there are 1 library for 1 faculty in humanities and social science. For the students, we have bachelor's degree, master's degrees, doctorate degrees. You can see that there is approximately an half part of students for humanities and social science. For the others, is less. But for the staff, general staff, academic staff, and scientific staff for the university, it's an equal part, a third part for each one of this sector. And then we have 11 libraries for this university, 11 libraries, including a central service, a small central services with the IT team and a central storage library for old collection and precious collection mainly. But 2 libraries in the sector of science and technology, 1 library for health science, and 7 libraries for the sector of humanities and social science. Also, since 2014, we have 5 learning centers. 5 learning centers totally included in the building of the libraries. It's a decision, but in other universities, there are a clear separation, administrative separation between libraries and learning center. My university, we decide to do together, and the management of libraries and the management of learning center is done by librarians. Are there really librarians? I don't know. In terms of surface in square meter, you can see that my library, BST, Bibliothèque des Sciences et Technologies, B is bibliothèque, is the most important. It's a building dating from 2014, formerly a building of chemistry, and totally refurbished in a library and learning center. As a beautiful building, modern and adapted to our job. In green, you can see the surface for the libraries in humanities and social science, and in red, the small library of health science. For the attendance of users, you can see that the most important library for the entries each year are the library of art, history, and literature, the library of law. The use of the books is most important for this library. And what is our organization? Quite not complicated. In my university, there is an academic council since 2001, an academic council who manage several small council or sub-council, a council for research, a council for learning, and a council for libraries. This council of libraries, there is 1 prorector, the librarian, 3 director of libraries, and 4 academics, and 1 delegate of scientists. And this group, the Council of Libraries, has to manage the budget, general budget, and the general strategy of libraries strategies. There are, I mean, this group, this council, and we have only 3 to 4 meetings a year. It's not so important, but the most important management body for our libraries is the board of library directors. We have a meeting each month. It's the librarian, it's the deputy librarian, the 11 directors, and the director of the library information system. Yes, okay. And this board of library director is supported by a central service, IT teams. I speak about that, and working groups of librarians coming from all libraries with specific thematic subject to trades. For example, communication marketing, for example, cataloging data. And then the board of library directors manage all the libraries. We have also, for taking account the basis, library commission with students and teachers that help the libraries or that consult the libraries when they have a problem. And then, since 2018, the libraries and unprepared librarians have gradually entered a dark age, a bit like in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, if you know, where little by little orcs and other evil spells have begun to spread to Middle-earth and the quietness of Middle-earth, that are the libraries. And what are these evil spells? New objective for libraries. A new learning center, in each libraries, most of them. Difficulties in the staff repartition between the libraries, the retirement of the head librarian, a new information system, and the pandemic. And all these together is very difficult for most of our librarians. What are the new objectives? New objectives are we have to participate in the development of the digital university. We have to ensure the optimal use of learning center and to develop support service for learning and research. It's not new for us. It's not new for my library in science and technology. It's not new in health science, but for some of the library, it's really new to develop this kind of service for digital university and research. So sorry. The 5 learning center, it's also new for most of them. The first one on the left-hand side is the learning center Pasteur in science and technologies, but also Montesquieu is a new one in 2019 in political science and economy. Saint-Georges is a new one also from 2019. And the last one, Hippocrate in the health science and Mercier in the sector of humanities, art, letters, and literature, are still in construction. But they are normally ready for 2003, we expect it. For most of our librarians, unprepared, it was also a difficulty because our traditional librarians, they like books, they like papers, but like a learning center where students are making noise, it's a difficulty. Well, another difficulty is the staff repartition. You have to know that, for example, it's small, but BSS in the second graphic on the upper left-hand side, the Library of Health and Science, there are 7 librarians for 8,000 potential users in the Faculty of Health Science. And on the other part, at the small square green, is the Library of Art and Literature. There are 16 librarians for 2,000 potential users. And it's quite a problem for some of us because it's normal that there are more librarians in the Faculty of Arts and Letters and Literature because the use of books is important. But taking account of the research, for the Library of Health Science, the research is very important. Actually, the research is very important. The help to research is more and more important each year, but there are no increase of staff. You have to know that in Belgium, it's very difficult to imagine that we can have new recruitment. The staff, the number of librarians is definitively stopped to a number, and it's possible to change it. And this disproportionate number of employees between the libraries, little by little, it's created some problems. And the retirement of our chief librarian, you can imagine what are the difficulties, because it's for May 22. Actually, the difficulty is that there is a report for the new engagement in July, August, or September. We expect it for September. What are the uncertainty? What are the change in people's management policy? What will be the acceptance of this new librarian of our structure? And you can imagine that it will create tension between library directors. No tension for the war of succession, but the difficulties to know who will be send its candidature. There is a great secret around that, and I don't know if my colleagues will be the future chief or not. The new informatics system, formerly we were with Virtua VTLS, Vision Technology, but since the presence of innovative, there are difficulties to follow up this project, and we decided to finish our collaboration with Virtua, and we have now a new system, Rero ELS. It's also an open source system from Switzerland, and we participate to the development of this product. I think that in the future, it will be one of the more interesting products for management of libraries and the collection, but they have to spend the youngest illness. And finally, the pandemic. You can imagine that it's a problem for everybody, for librarians, for students, for teachers, for everybody. And I suppose that you have the same problem than us. And it became clear that in order to meet this challenge and to be more efficient to conduct them, knowing that there will not be an increase in staff, a new library organization had to be put in place as soon as possible. And with our discussion between directors, two models quickly emerged. The two models are not really original, but the first one is a strong centralization, a stronger centralization with some of the librarians and directors that are transferred and assigned to the central service. And the second model, a management of all the common activities and service by working groups of librarians and directors that they remain in place in their library, but also they work more or better for common activities. And how to organize stronger centralization, we imagine to create 6 units, effective units with staff taken from the libraries. Okay, a unit for connection and the documentary resource, or actually in the central services, we have only the management of electronic resource, e-books and e-journals, but all the rest is managed directly in the local libraries. We imagine to create also a service for users with interlibrary loan, the front desk procedure. We try to fix common rules. But it's very difficult. There is a group actually in communication and marketing, a very efficient group, but the difficulty is they need more autonomy. They claim that their choice must always be endorsed by the board of directors. Then we expect to create a communication and marketing service for all the library in the central services. The support to research, and particularly for the research data management, we have only an half part full-time equivalent. An half part, and she is in the central service, but it's insufficient. We have to increase the power of this team. For the space, equipment, and materials, but actually we expect to create a new unit, but actually it's only the board of directors who organize the space, equipment, and materials when we have to have group purchases, and the personal and quality management. It's a real problem also. It's only managed locally in each library. And how to create this unit, but we have to merge the libraries. There are 11 libraries. We have to merge these libraries from 10 libraries to 4 main libraries. With local antenna for small campus, a reduction of local directors, and in favor of new central service director, and a greater specialization of librarians, cataloging in central service or assistant to users in libraries, the management of web page in central services, and the animation of cultural event in libraries. Then we have to create librarians that are more specialized in their activities. It's one of the model. The other is to continue like actually, the libraries are not merged on the central service, but the central service actually is just to manage the general coordination and few common activities like the ELS and electronic resource. But we create a working group of librarians from all library. They are reinforced and constituted to manage common activities in cataloging, in communication and marketing, and something like that. And also each library director receive a supplementary responsibility in this group or alone to manage a particular topics. For example, in my university, when we have to manage the LibQual survey, I have to do that at the benefit of all the university, all the libraries. Why not? It's a possibility, and I like to do that. It's a second possibility, and the problem, and you can see that there are fights in my bag. The problem is that at the end of 20 and during 21, the directors spent 3 days outdoors and mainly in the other meetings to discuss the best choice for organization. And the disagreement were deep between us, between the partisans of the two ways. With the problem that the university authorities waiting for a constructive choice for the future, and also that all librarians were concerned about the lack of a decision regarding to the future of the libraries. And our teams and librarians help us to find the best way. In fact, 6 groups of librarians from all libraries met by subject matter, and around this table of discussion and focus group with a free speech, a real free speech, they have expressed the advantage and the disadvantage of both models for them and in their daily feelings and practice. In the total, there are 21 meetings with 56 librarians. They discuss about the resource, the cataloging, the service to users, and the help to research, the communication marketing, and something like that. And they say no to a stronger centralization, some of them, because the change is scary. Because centralization stifles creativity. Because a collaborative model is more flexible, motivating for us. Because we don't like to do the same thing over and over again. It's heavy. When you work in your library, the morning you can work in the front desk, and the afternoon in the catering, that and something like that. Some of them say no to a stronger centralization, but some of them say yes to the stronger centralization. Difficult to find the good way, because working together creates a mutual enrichment through teamwork in central services. There is a better visibility at the level of the institution of the university. There is also a clear vision of each person's mission. It's very important. We know exactly who do what. Also, for example, when you work together in the same office, there is a large reduction of mail from one library to another, and something like that. We have the 11 directors. We have read the report of our librarians, and we discuss. We discussed the question, and there is a vote. We organize a vote between us. We are 11, And yes, the director agree with the general idea of a more transversal and shared organization. It's a chance. There are some of them, they say no. Not many. But by the way, in creating new units in the central service, stronger central service, the directors say, no, we do not agree with the creation of new functional units in the central service that will do our current work by taking staff from our local libraries. And yes, we have an absolute majority of voice to make cross-functional groups of librarians assigned to common tasks and project more effective. Here I expected to create a small survey to know your opinion about this kind of organization, but it will be difficult and I prefer to discuss with you after that, if it's possible. And finally, the model of maintaining the current distribution of libraries and staff without centralization was chosen in January 2022. The goal is now to organize properly our transversal management, who will be able to work with other librarians from other libraries, who will develop a real spirit of sharing skills to serve all libraries in our teams. And then waiting for a new librarian, 4 directors volunteered to implement this better organization and to find the good people with the good skills, 2 supporters of each of the 2 models. I am in the floor. Understand that. And our project will be based on a better knowledge of the task and skills of each employee. I say that 98 persons in our libraries, a reorganization of the thematic work groups. The work groups, actual work groups, they have to have a greater dynamics, a better transversally, a regular reporting, because some of group we don't know they do exactly, and they have to have a real decision-making autonomy in order to be more efficient and to accelerate the procedure. And we expect also to have a stronger assumption of cross-functional activity or responsibility by each director or deputy director. We expect to develop the project and the challenge really to be taken up by the new head librarian. And what are my conclusions? If you read the document of the paper of F.G.A, Knowles, and the other in Liber Quarterly, library resilience and leadership in a global crisis. It's not too small. We have to be safe and resilient to the future. Library leaders are urged to adapt flexible strategic plans that apply to every facet of library operation to ensure the organization remain safe and resilient in the future. And I expect from my university that organization, we decide note for the future organization, will be resilient and safe for the future, not for now. And the strategic alliance is an example of the New York Public Library in the Harvard Business Review, where they say that the employee involvement in strategic conversation open up real possibilities. We know that, everybody, we know that, but it's important to write it. And it's important to say that with our employees and our librarians, we have to create a real strategic alliance like in the Lord of the Rings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Crikey, we've had a real variety here, haven't we? The last 3 speakers of reimagining the workplace and organisational culture. What fascinating and really interesting talks. Thank you very much indeed. We're moving to the question and answer part of this afternoon's session. And I don't know if anybody has any questions for Valerie or for Frederick. Do we have anything on? We have Lars. Do we have anything online? No. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for 3 very good presentations, but I really identified very much with Frederick's story, which I think was an honest story about the problems that many of us perhaps can recognize. And I guess that you are not finished with your discussions about the organization. but it is so that we have to develop competency to change the organization. And your model will, I guess, not last for another 20 years.
I inform you that I will not be the head librarian because I prefer like Cardinal Richelieu, you know? He's not the king, but his power is better. I will inform you of the success.
Fantastic, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? No? So I'd like to just thank all of our presenters and for yourself for your attention this afternoon, both in person and